you're going to do it, the audit should be worth it. The problem is, audits are hard. Yet we've issued over 20,000 reports to 2,000 clients worldwide.
The reality is unless you specialize in the field of risk and in security, you may not be identifying key attributes.
Cybersecurity and compliance will no longer be a mystery. Hey everyone, welcome into our Cybersecurity Mission podcast. My name is Allie Krings, I'm your host. Today I am sitting down with Kurt Warren and we're talking all about business continuity plans. Kurt, how are you?
Good.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, before we dive into what business continuity plans are and how we can get there, let's talk about you and your background. So walk me through some of your experiences.
So I've been in the IT field for about 28 years. Born and raised in Miami, Florida, and with living in Miami comes a lot of disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, and flooding and different things. So that's kind of where I learned intimately about that background. So taking that knowledge and applying it to the work environment is kind of second nature.
Interesting. So, but why even IT?
Well, it really started with, I owe my career to my parents, probably specifically my father. Back when the Commodore 64 came out at Sears, and he came in the door one day, and I still remember the box, and I just kind of took to it by nature. They recognized something in me.
Cool.
And just went from there, transferred to school and eventually to a career.
Amazing. And now how long have you been with Kirkpatrick Price?
A little over 4 years.
Phenomenal. So we're going to dive into business continuity plans, and we're just going to start at the very top here. What is a business continuity plan?
Starting off with the business, right? Businesses they make money, so they need to continue to make money, and so they need to come up with plans to, if a process or an individual or a system breaks down, they need to somehow continue making money and figure out how to get that process or that system, back up and or replace that individual to keep the business going. That's some of the reasons why they would need it.
So I know this is like a really silly question, but just for everybody joining me today, does every company, from the largest ones at thousands of employees to the smallest of companies, does everybody need to have a business continuity plan?
I mean, it's recommended. I think, no matter what business you're in, something at some point in time is going to happen.
Have you ever heard of Murphy's Law? I feel like that gets more and more true. In any industry that you work in or live in, what can go wrong will go wrong.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about some of the business continuity plans and the why that we need them. What are things that would even prevent your business from running?
There could be your funds, the money that you have to run your business can disappear. Mm-hmm. There's been some examples of that in the news not too long ago with some of the folding, the banks that folded. It could be a death in the company by key personnel. There's tons of reasons, numbers of reasons.
So, it's not always like the most exciting thing to talk about when you go into a company and you're having these conversations. But is that something you say like, hey, one of your top leaders, could be in a situation where they're no longer able to lead. We need to have a plan in place. Is that how this goes down?
It's part of it, yes.
Are you guys having a brainstorm session of like, there could be a tornado, there could be a fire? What else would impact for a business continuity plan?
Yeah, there's, like you mentioned, environmental conditions, weather conditions, depending on what region of the world you live in. There's hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, fires. You hear about it all day, all year. Things happen. And, in Miami specifically, we have, these tropical events, and they pour a lot of water on the ground. And,
sure do.
Businesses close, schools close, and, at some point in time, you have to get back to business.
And with that being said, though, obviously, that's a huge impact environmentally when, let's just say the roads are flooded, right? Not only can you not get into the building, but a lot of your employees may not even be able to leave their home. So how does a business continuity plan kind of address that, and walk us through what that might look like?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think everybody's kind of used to COVID, right? So that was a situation where everyone was in the office, coming in, driving in, and suddenly we're all working from home or out of jobs in some regard, right? So organizations will provide as part of their plan. Provide laptops so individuals can work at home or some other location. They provide certain systems that they may not have had previously, so that it can support the continuity of work and keeping the business alive. Some organizations, lots of restaurants, they close down because it's a slightly different industry, service industry. But when it comes to a corporation, whether you employ thousands of people, you provide significant service. You need to make sure that that's continues to run, and so it's very important to have a well thought out plan and the appropriate resources available to it to continue running.
Would you ever suggest to a company that they don't need to have a business continuity plan?
No, I mean, it's again, there's all different sizes of organizations. If you just look at a simple restaurant, again, living in Miami, a lot of the restaurants closed down during COVID.
Yep.
Or if you lose a liquor license, you'll stop being able to service particular customers, right? Depending on if you're in a tourist area. So you need to have some kind of backup plan for no matter what you do. When you shift focus to a large organization, I worked in agricultural for a little while. If there's a drought in a particular region where it affects a farm, right?
Yep.
If you have no other farms, you're not growing product or produce and not being able to sell product. So it's you need to have plans for all types of events and all types of scenarios depending on the size of the organization you're in.
And it's such an important call out that it's everybody is going to be affected by, a disaster of varying levels at some point, right? So let's talk about this as far as implementing a plan. What is the very first step that you would recommend a company does in order to start creating that business continuity plan?
Yeah, sure. To start off, I mean, this might seem a little, a little backwards. I mean, some of the leaders of the organization, you would think that they would know their business and know how it operates. But the truth is, not everybody knows everything about the business. So you want to start off with a business impact assessment, a BIA. It's basically just a process that you, walk around to the various departments or the various areas within your business, and you're documenting what they do and what's critical, what's sensitive, and what it takes to continue that process or that function, and you're documenting it, and you're basically providing with a ranking of sorts, and the high-ranking items you need to address, and you figure out how to address them based on what they are, and then from there you're able to kind of document things in a plan, and succession plans, and how to continue to finance your organization, and how to continue to get certain functions to work and processes to work, and you just continue on it in that manner, and until you come up with a well-detailed, organized plan, and there's different frameworks to address it, but in general, at the top level, that's how you would go about it.
So let's talk about a couple of examples. Maybe you could give us an example of, a company that obviously didn't have a plan that was robust enough to support them in place. Walk us through what that looks like and eventually how that impacts the company.
So, you have a lot of organizations. I could think of one. Again, living in Miami, I went through Hurricane Andrew, one of the significant hurricanes. There was a large corporation. At the time, there was no cloud, no cloud environments like we have today. They had a physical data center.
Yep.
And their data center happened to be, slightly below sea level underground. There's a lot of coral rock in Miami, and but they did not anticipate the flooding event that occurred during the hurricane. So their entire data center, which was concentrated at that one location, completely flooded, and they were completely down. Wow. I think the industry was insurance, and it was quite challenging. I mean, they basically had to start from scratch and acquire new equipment and restore from tapes, and it was a long, very arduous process, and eventually that organization got acquired by a larger organization, but a lot of organizations end up going out of business, and they can't recover. It just depends on what the scenario is.
So, I think that's a really important place to see, just how south these really can go, right?
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, it's not necessarily always being scared of the what ifs. It's just having that preparation. I think that's really what we're seeking. So, can you give us an example of maybe a company that was faced with some challenges and they were actually able to maybe not operate as optimally as without the challenge, but still operate well?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the main thing comes across is, having that plan and having the training in place, and having all of your team members trained to it.
Yeah.
There's an example of a client that I had that one of the banks that folded here not too long ago, their payroll was attached to that bank that held their funds, and they basically didn't have access to those funds. They had done some preparation, some training for this particular scenario, and they had some diversified funds, and were able to make some adjustments and continue on without really a hiccup. So, by having a plan in place and by having some contingencies, things seem to work out.
And one of the things I think is really interesting, because a business continuity plan, of course, that calls for talking about disasters, right? Like a hurricane, let's say that. But on the flip side, we also need a plan in place for the day that you wake up and there's been a storm and now the power is out in the entire building. So how does, what's a plan look like for that? I mean, for a simple power outage, or, maybe it's the server that everybody uses on the, for your emails, that the server is now gone down. What does a company do, and how can they help prepare for that?
Yeah, sure. So if you have a big physical presence within within a building, there's generators, large battery banks that you can attach to your equipment to keep it running. The availability factor, right? Today we have the cloud, so you can have a contingency plan that leverages the cloud, and you can either have a full cloud system or a hybrid system, which is physical on-site, on-premise, and also mixed with the cloud. So there's a lot of different flexibilities that are out there today that would help curtail the long-term effects from something like that. But again, you just have to understand what your risks are, that business impact analysis, and identify these things, and just have a pliable, detailed plan worked out, in order to compensate for it. But those are some of the things to keep the power going.
How would you recommend testing your BCP?
So that's a really good question. I think this is where a lot of organizations kind of drop the ball. They have a plan. They feel like, oh, we have a plan. We've already done the stuff, the work, right, that goes into it. I think one of the things that I ask when I go out to organizations is, where do you keep your plan? And they always state, well, it's on a server, it's in the cloud, and do all your employees have accessibility to it? Yes, sure, they have accessibility to it, but do all of your employees have a copy of it handy at their home in a drawer somewhere where they can get access to it? And the answer is normally no, they don't. So when the power does go out, when the systems do go down, you're not able to access that plan, and if you're not trained well enough, you don't have a physical copy of that plan, you're not going to know what to do. You're not going to know who to call, the phone numbers. So having an annual or semi-annual or maybe even quarterly team exercise, there's normally a list of individuals in that plan with contact information and roles and responsibilities. It would be wise to practice just like a football team or a basketball team practices for the big event, right? If you don't practice, you're not going to be prepared, and if you're not prepared, chances are you're going to fail at the objective of continuity or recovery.
So one of the things that we talked about was maybe there is a key player or leader in an organization that's no longer able to perform their duties for one reason or another. Let's just say that somebody up and quits, right? Is that also something that you need to plan for? And what do you even should everybody be documenting their policies and procedures throughout the day?
Again, with that business impact analysis in that particular scenario, you're going to identify critical or sensitive processes, right, that occur within the organization, whatever they may be. And you need to, document what those are. You need to, like you said, physically document on a piece of paper, step 1, step 2, step 3, if it is something that's very critical that the organization relies upon on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in order to keep going. If you don't have that documented and you have one individual, like a key employee, that gets up and leaves, or whatever the case is, there's different insurances that you can have in place to help compensate or maybe hire someone or whatever the case is that you can obtain. But if you don't have that critical process documented,
Yeah.
you're going to, going to be a fish out of the water for a period of time and until you can figure out how to recuperate. So yeah, definitely documentation is a big key.
So when you're in, one of these scenarios and you're coming up with all of your examples of issues that could possibly arise, should you be testing yourself, like your own company, or is this when you do want to bring in an auditor or bring in, a third party to be able to kind of identify different vulnerabilities that may be present?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, by doing everything internal, in-house, you may feel comfortable. You may feel like things are set, so to speak. They're documented. We're testing. We feel confident. But the reality is unless you specialize in the field of risk and in security, you may not be identifying key attributes or key risks. And so, getting a third party to come in, skilled individuals with experience and knowledge, and that's held positions before, similar to what would be within that organization, they're able to come in a week or two, study the organization, study the company, understand what business they do, and identify maybe some additional risks that are present that the internal folks did not identify, and then you can therefore document those things. Again, list them out in your business impact analysis, your risk assessments, and then document any kind of critical processes or functions that might be around that. And it's definitely a good point to have a third party come in and validate what you're doing.
What are some of the biggest risks that maybe a company is overlooking, in their day-to-day?
I think there's a variety of things. I think one of the things that they're overlooking is that I think a lot of companies are too confident in their own abilities. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a detriment. They kind of have the horse blinders on, right? They day in and day out, they do what they do.
Yep.
And which is fine, and it's great, and they might be able to get along. But when it comes to, depending on the complexity of your organization, when it comes to disastrous events, you may not know how to recover from those particular things. So, I think that's one of the main things that I see is just overconfidence in the existing internal employees, and the horse blinders are on.
Kurt, is there anything else that you want to add about business continuity plans?
Probably the biggest two that I can think of is educate yourself, to your respective industry, see what other people are doing, and then, and more importantly, is learning how to communicate. Incorporate communication into your plan and into the recovery process. People, they discount communication, and to give you a really large example was the Puerto Rico, when they had that hurricane and took out the power on the island. There was no way to communicate outbound. They had their internet connections were severed, their power was severed. They had no communication.
Right.
And so it's if you don't have any communication, then you're not able to coordinate, acquire, and everything else. So communication is a big key, and you just need to identify the important aspects, where that communication is needed. So.
It's just fascinating. So, Kurt, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us. I look forward to doing it again soon.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
When you work with a Kirkpatrick Price cybersecurity auditor, you work with someone who's been in your shoes. Let's see what the next expert is ready to share to support you in your cybersecurity mission.
Hey, my name is Joshua Webb, and I'm an information security auditor here at Kirkpatrick Price. When I was in high school, I grew up in the DC metro area and had the opportunity to go on a tour of the Pentagon's Network Operations Center. And when I was there, we were walking through, I noticed there were some screens on the wall, and those screens had pie charts with countries' names next to them. And I asked the tour guide, I said, what's so special about those pie charts with those country names? And he said, well, that's the amount of times that those countries had attacked the U.S. that day. And from that point forward, I was sold. I knew I wanted to be in cybersecurity. And so throughout the years, I spent some time in IT, did some time in a nonprofit that also did natural disaster incident response. And from that, I really developed a love of business continuity and disaster response. If you're ever looking for some help in building your business continuity plan, I highly suggest that you go check out FEMA's Incident Command System, While it's not specifically designed for information security, it's very applicable and could be a good help if you're trying to build something new. And then if you ever need some additional help, feel free to check us out at kirkpatrickprice.com. Thanks.
Today's episode highlights the need for business continuity and disaster recovery to achieve our challenging compliance goals. BCP and DR enable you to continue operations securely during and after a business disruption. Are you ready to join a community of 10,000 people who are working together to elevate the standards for cybersecurity and compliance? It's free to sign up at kirkpatrickprice.com/podcast or check the show notes and achieve greater levels of assurance today. Thanks for joining us on our cybersecurity mission.